What's up, YouTube? Back with another video. For today's video, I'd like to talk about considering the fact that we've seen WWE bring Jordan Grace, Javon Evans, Trick Williams up to the main roster, as well as we've seen promos for Obafemi from NXT being played on SmackDown and Raw. And we've also seen like WWE hiring to the main roster Joe Hendry and Matt Cardona from TNA. Considering all of this, we figure it's probably going to be February of 2026. It's probably going to be very similar to February 2025, how that was, where that was a month where WWE, they terminated a whole slew of wrestlers on their roster. And because it always seems like that's the way it is with the company. Whenever they bring people up from NXT up to the main roster, they end up terminating a bunch of people that are currently on the main roster. Because it seems like they always want to keep the number of people on the main roster right about even. You know, if they bring 10 people up from developmental, then they end up firing 10 of the current people from on the main roster. And so let's just take a look at who has left the company in WWE as of this month so far, because it's January 31st, 2026. And let's also take a look back at the people that either quit WWE in 2025 or were fired by the company, because there's quite a long list. And I would just bet you that when you hear about all these people, there's probably people that you either forgot were terminated or quit, or maybe people that you didn't realize were actually gone from the company. Maybe you were thinking maybe they actually were injured and that's why you haven't seen them on TV, but in reality, they either quit or they were fired. So let's take a look at who these people are. Let's find out. Let's get up to speed with all this. So for the month of January 2026, the people in WWE so far that I've heard that have left the company, they weren't actually people that were fired. They were people that quit. If you've been watching All Elite Wrestling recently, you may have seen that Tommaso Ciampa from the SmackDown roster, he now is in All Elite Wrestling. And that's a sign that things might be getting kind of bad in WWE if Tommaso Ciampa, of all people, who was a top, Triple H guy, even he wants to leave the company and he wants to go to All Elite Wrestling, and that might not be a good sign about the way things are in WWE. Also, now yesterday, on January 30th, we've seen that NXT General Manager Ava Raine, she had posted on social media that she had officially quit WWE. Her contract had expired and she did not want to renew it. And I really didn't have a problem with General Manager Ava one way or the other. I was like, whatever, but I know a lot of people really did not care for her because they felt like, she only got her position on television that she did because she was the daughter of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. But if it wouldn't have been for that, she never would have been put on television. But, so she didn't say anything about like what she intends to do in her future, like going forward. But anyway, like it should be interesting to see who they'll end up putting in that role of the NXT general manager. Maybe they'll just have Shawn Michaels doing it for a while, or it'd be good to see even William Regal come back to do that position, because I thought he was good in that position when he used to play the general manager role on NXT. Also, in January 2026, we had another person that had quit. We had NXT wrestler and also Evolve wrestler, Brinley Reese. She had shoulder surgery in April of 2025, and she never came back from that. It's like, she had that. She said she had other health issues along with that, and she really didn't want to pursue it. So that's how things went with her. But all the people in 2025, and there was a hell of a list of people that got terminated from WWE or who quit. So let's take a look at who these people were. We had one person in January of 2025 that got terminated, and it was a surprise to me It was Duke Hudson, and it was on January 31st he was terminated from the company, and he had he was one of those wrestlers from NXT. He had been his gimmick was he was in part of Andre Chase University, and I think WWE, they probably terminated him as a wrestler that he had been with the company a long time. Like, you might have remembered him back being in the company in 2020 when he was going by his real name, Brendan Vink, on WWE Raw. And it's to the point where WWE, what they say with their NXT wrestlers and their people in the in NXT, the WWE Evolve and their WWE ID program, they evaluate these people every 90 days, and if they're not coming along to progressing the way that they want them to, they say they're going to terminate them and give other people a chance. If they don't feel like these people will ever end up making it onto the main roster, they terminate them. And he was one of the people that they cut on January 31st. Now, about a little over a week later, about 7-8 days later, in February, that's when WWE really ended up terminating a lot of people. We saw, it was a surprise. A lot of these were people that they hadn't been doing a lot with in the last month or month and a half. We saw the tag team, the Authors of Pain, Akam and Razor. Now, I was upset to see those guys get terminated because, I like the way they were booked on NXT. Like, they were kind of like the new version of the Road Warriors, but on the main roster, they didn't seem to do so much with them, and even kind of had them even getting embarrassed and even on television and stuff. So it was kind of a shame to see that. I don't think they really brought them to their full potential in the main roster, but they got rid of Akam and Razor, the Authors of Pain, along with their manager, Paul Ellering, in February 2025. Another wrestler they got rid of in February 2025 was Cedric Alexander, and if you've been watching TNA wrestling, he moved on to TNA, and he's always on TNA wrestling, and he's one of their better wrestlers on that show. So, that was a good move for him. He's a good fit on TNA. I think he works out good there. Another one that they terminated in February 2025 in WWE was Blair Davenport. Now, she was one of those wrestlers when they brought her up from NXT, they brought her up to the main roster, and they really barely did anything with her. So they hardly ever had her on television. Next thing you know, they terminated her, and that was the end of her. Also in February 2025, they got rid of Sonya Deville and Shayna Baszler. They were two tag team partners that worked together along with their cohort, Zoe Stark. Now, Zoe Stark's still employed with the company, but they got rid of Sonya Deville and Shayna Baszler, which was surprising back then because they were on TV practically on Raw every week, Another one they got rid of back then in February of 2025 was Giovanni Vinci, who he was hardly ever on television. He had been on NXT. He was on television a lot under the name Fabian Eichner when he was there with his tag team partner, Ludwig Kaiser. But on the main roster, as of that time, he wasn't on television a lot. Isla Dawn, that was Alba Fire's tag team partner. They got rid of her on February 2025. Also, in that month, they got rid of Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, who for months, the writing team, month after month after month, they had them on NXT all the time. And these guys were signed under multi-million-dollar contracts, and WWE's attitude was you know what? We can't really figure out anything good to do with these guys on the main roster, and we don't think it's right to be paying. We don't want to be paying people these multi-million-dollar contracts just to have them in NXT month after month after month. It's good that, the newer wrestlers, they can get trained by Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson and everything, but it's they don't really want to be paying people multi-million-dollar contracts just to have them in NXT month in and month out. So they ended up terminating those guys. Also in February of 2025, they also terminated Elektra Lopez and also Carmella, who Carmella is, if you haven't heard already, that's Corey Graves' his wife in real life. And when she was terminated in February 2025, I don't think she had been on WWE television in years. I know she had had a child recently, but I don't. been a couple of years since she had been on television. Then we move on to April of 2025. Now, that was a case where it was like a retirement. We had WWE NXT and NXT UK wrestler Meiko Satomura, who you also might remember. She was in WCW in 1996 and 1997, but she had been a wrestler for decades and decades. So she was at the point where she was retiring. And we moved on to May of 2025. That was a month where WWE terminated a lot of wrestlers back then. And where we saw the one I was the most upset about was Braun Strowman. Oh my God, he was one of my favorite people on the main roster. And it's like WWE felt like at the time, like they're like, well, we pay this guy way more than what we'd really like to be paying him. We pay this guy this multi-million-dollar contract, and we don't really feel like they didn't want to pay him that much anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised they end up rehiring this guy, but at a much lower rate. But they ended up terminating Braun Strowman. It seems like they only want to have like one big monster-sized guy on each roster now. Like they just want to have, like, say, Tala Tonga on SmackDown and Bronson Reed on Raw, like that, and then they had Obafemi on NXT, and then, but yeah, that sucked to lose Braun Strowman. Also in May of 2025, they also got rid of Cora Jade, which, if you've been watching TNA recently, last few weeks, TNA hired Cora Jade, but, Cora Jade's not one of those people that I really missed, so I don't think she's really going to be a big benefit to TNA, in my opinion, but anyway, that's how they worked that out. And also, Dakota Kai, they terminated in May of 2025, and also, in real life, her real-life boyfriend, Eddie Thorpe, was terminated, which was surprising because at the time, Eddie Thorpe, he was like a main eventer in NXT. I was like, how could they get rid of Eddie Thorpe? But I figured they probably did it because they figure, well, since they're in a relationship, we want to get rid of Dakota Kai. So we figure if we want to get rid of one, we got to get rid of the other, because otherwise, if one is left behind after the other one just gets terminated, maybe the other one's going to start a bunch of backstage trouble, or maybe that's what their thinking was. So they figured we got to get rid of one. Well, then we'll get rid of the other one too. Maybe that was their thinking. Now, also in May of 2025, Dani Palmer left the company. We had seen her in NXT Level Up. We'd seen her on WWE Evolve. That was a case where she basically retired from wrestling. Unfortunately for her, she was getting one injury after the other, putting her out of action for months at a time. So she decided to move on from wrestling. Now, the next person I want to talk about, she was a person, Gigi Dolan. In my opinion, oh, wow. She was one of the most beautiful women in wrestling. Oh, my God. With a body like hers, she's been off the market like forever, I mean, she was never on the market to begin with, oh my God. She's had a boyfriend ever since grade school, you guarantee you, with a body like hers. So anyway, Gigi Dolan, she was one of the people that they terminated on May 2nd of 2025. That was a shame to see that happen. Next person, Jakara Jackson, as one of the people that WWE terminated. Now, if you've been watching TNA wrestling, she's always on TNA wrestling. She goes by a different name, though. Now she's called Mara Sade. So that's how that worked out for her. Also in May of 2025, WWE got rid of WWE NXT and Evolve wrestler Javier Bernal. And also, WWE got rid of the three-man team Gallus, Joe Coffey, Mark Coffey, and Wolfgang. Feeling like, well, these guys have been in the WWE system for a long time, and we don't feel that these guys really will ever make it to the main roster. So they terminated all those guys. When they were terminated, they had been helping out on WWE Evolve a lot. Up next, we had it in May of 2025, WWE, they terminated the tag team of Caden Carter and Katana Chance. Now, if you've been watching All Elite Wrestling recently, you've been seeing Caden Carter on their Ring of Honor weekly show. So she's there working with the fallen angel Christopher Daniels, who now works as a manager. So that's what she's doing now. Also, WWE terminated a couple of NXT wrestlers that were working on WWE Evolve most recently, Oro Mensah and Riley Osborne. You know, we've seen Riley Osborne with the Andre Chase University. On Oro Mensah, he had been working with, Noam Dar and Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. And let's see, also, in May of 2025, WWE terminated one of the hosts of WWE The Bump, a recap show, Ryan Papola. And let's see, who else was there? Oh, Shotzi Blackheart. That was another wrestler that they terminated. And she was somebody that unfortunately was very injury prone. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they ended up terminating her. Also, finally, in May of 2025, WWE had terminated WWE Evolve wrestler Freedom Ramsey. I had seen him once in a while working as a jobber. Now, next we move on to June of 2025. That had some wrestlers being terminated there. That had, Carlito Caribbean Cool. He had been working as a member of the Judgment Day. We saw he was terminated on June 14th, 2025. Some reports had said that there were some disciplinary problems, that he had a bad attitude, so maybe that worked into that whole thing. Also that month, that was where WWE decided for some stupid reason to terminate R-Truth. How could you get rid of R-Truth? He's one, even though lots of times they use him as a jobber, for heaven's sake, he's more over than lots of these other guys are that are much higher up on the card. But then you wonder, okay, then there was a big uproar about R-Truth being terminated. Everybody's saying, how could you get rid of R-Truth? He had been there since at least 2005 when he started working under the name K-Quick, And, he had gone to TNA for a while under the name Ron Killings and all, but for the most part, he'd been with, WWE all that time, all those times and stuff. But then, after there was a big uproar about that, they ended up rehiring him and everything, and it made people wonder, was he ever actually even fired at all and stuff? Maybe he just really, it was just some kind of a storyline or something, just to draw attention to the company or something. You never know. But also, in early June of 2025, Valhalla, she's was working along with the War Raiders, Eric and Ivar. So, she ended up being terminated by WWE at that time. Now, going on to July of 2025, we saw that was where Bill Goldberg, now he officially retired from wrestling. So, yeah, of course, his contract, you could say he was released from WWE because he was officially retired. He wrestled his last match. So, July 12th, 2025, that was the end of his time with WWE as he was retired. Also, the host of one of the WWE's host of their recap show This Week in WWE, Scott Stamford, he, as of July 10th, 2025, that was the end of his time with WWE, and he had been working with the company doing recap shows for the last 15 years. He was on shows hosting shows like WWE Afterburn. And, like I said, they did This Week with in WWE. And there was another show. I forget offhand what the heck was the name. What was the other name of that other show that he did? But anyway, that was the end of the line for him. Then we had in August, we had a bunch of other terminations. We had Ashanti the Adonis. He was on NXT. Now, we saw him on NXT. Well, he was on 205 Live. Then he was on NXT. Then he was on SmackDown. He was the tag team partner of Top Dollar, AJ Francis, and then he was moved back to NXT. Well, he ended up quitting the company there, and then we saw also in August Karrion Kross and Scarlett Bordeaux, married couple there, and it was a shame with Karrion Kross because he did great in NXT. But when they brought him to the main roster, I'll tell you, they did nothing with the guy. They they made him look like he was just another random guy on the roster. The way they booked the guy's matches, they made it look like he couldn't win a match unless his wife was cheating, unless his wife was interfering in the matches, I mean, which was crazy because, like, in NXT, they made it look like he was, like, unstoppable. Like, nobody could beat the guy. Then they bring him to the main roster, and they made it look like, well, the only reason why he wins is because his wife is interfering, So they made him look like a nobody. And also in August of 2025, we had, and from NXT, Yoshiki Inamura. They had his contract with NXT. That's no more, and he's gone back to wrestling in Pro Wrestling Noah, and he's like some type of heavyweight champion over there right now. And we also had, in August of 2025, we had Jordan Oasis. If you've been watching WWE Evolve, you've seen Jordan Oasis. Well, he's no longer with the company. Now let's move on to September. We have a bunch of people no longer with the company in September of 2025. Let's take a look at this. We have Andrade Cien Almas. Lots of times they basically just call him Andrade anymore. Well, unfortunately, he was fired. They said he's violating the company's wellness policy. Substance usage. You're not supposed to be doing it. There was reports of another time Andrade, he was escorted off the premises, as disciplinary reasons, So then we've seen Andrade Cien Almas. He's gone back to the name Andrade El Idolo in All Elite Wrestling. So that's where he's at right now, if you haven't seen that already. Also, in WWE in September, we've seen Idris Enofe from NXT and also from more recently from WWE Evolve. He ended up quitting. He wanted to try his luck elsewhere on the wrestling scene, so hey, more power to the guy. Another wrestler that quit in September 2025 was Jasmine Nix. She had been teaming for a long time with Fallon Henley and JC Jane, the current NXT women's champion. Jasmine Nix, she wanted her contract had run out, and she said, well, she wanted more money elsewhere, so she left the company in September of 2025. Also out of the company as of September 2025 was Ice Williams from WWE Evolve. So, he was going up against Marcus Mathers. He was trying to feud with him. I think probably even trying to feud with Super Shawn Legacy. But yeah, Ice Williams, he's no longer with WWE anymore. And let's see, moving on to October. We had quite a few people from October. They got rid of a lot of people here, too. This is also a case where they were saying people in NXT, in WWE Evolve, and in the WWE ID program, like every 90 days, if they're not developing to a certain point, to where we want them and stuff, we're going to unfortunately have to terminate them and have to bring other people up to replace them to see if those other people are what we're looking for. We're looking for people that are going to make it on the main roster. So here we have a bunch of people ended up losing their jobs or quitting in some cases. Here we see in October 2025, we have Zeta Steele, who was on WWE Evolve every week. Now, she ended up quitting. Her contract came up for renewal, and she didn't want to renew it, and she's now in All Elite Wrestling. You might have seen her particularly in there with whatchamacallit. She's in there with the fallen angel Christopher Daniels. I think I mentioned something by mistake. I think I mistakenly said Caden Carter was working with him, but that's not the case really. That's actually Zeta Steele is in there with the fallen angel Christopher Daniels now, working with him. Who's Christopher Daniels is a manager at this point. So that's where she's at right now. But also WWE, now they terminated wrestlers like BJ Ray from WWE Legends and Future Greats. Now, no surprise there. I mean, the guy was a good talker, but unfortunately, he really, it's hard to say you really saw all that much in him as a wrestler. He wasn't that good of a wrestler. Also, from WWE Evolve, Draco Knox, he's not with the company anymore. WWE also got rid of Hayes Jamison from WWE Evolve, and she was also on WWE Legends and Future Greats. Also gone is Jamar Hampton from WWE Evolve, who is formerly known as Troy Yearwood from the WWE Legends and Future Greats. Also gone from WWE Evolve is Jin Tala, who was formerly known as Leigh Laurel, or Leigh Laurel, rather, from WWE Legends and Future Greats. Also gone from WWE Evolve is Kylie Ray, which people thought that was kind of lame in the sense that, okay, she announced on September 22nd she was pregnant, and by October 10th, WWE announced that they had terminated her, and it's like, they were like, well, come on. They didn't have to, like, terminate her right then and there, because they figure the wrestlers in WWE Evolve, they're on that WWE ID program, they're barely getting paid anything anyway, so it's not like, they could have kept her on there, and so, and also, it was surprising that in October, that WWE terminated their Evolve general manager, Stevie Turner, who also worked as the NXT assistant, as an assistant general manager towards NXT general manager Ava, along with Robert Stone, who was also considered an assistant general manager on NXT. So Stevie Turner, she's no longer around in WWE Evolve or NXT. Also, WWE Evolve and WWE Legends of Future Greats wrestler Summer Sorrell, she's no longer around in the company. She was also terminated. Also from the famous Polynesian family, the Anawi family, that includes like Rikishi and the Usos and Roman Reigns, Lance Anawi. He was terminated, but he was on the NXT roster, but he never made it to television. That was the thing. They had him there, but on October 10th, 2025, the company made the decision to terminate him. Also in October, as far as other releases went, the company also terminated Wes Lee, which that surprised a lot of people. He had been working on NXT and more recently on WWE Evolve, and he had gotten some injuries that had sidelined him for quite a while over the past few years, but he was back in Evolve now, and now we've seen him. He's gone on to All Elite Wrestling there. And let's see, also in October, we have Zara Zacher. She quit the company, they say. And also, October 16th, that's when they released Bryce Donovan from his contract there. And Bryce Donovan, he was one of the people in one of the 5 people in the group, The Vanity Project, that was featured very prominently on WWE Evolve every week. So long to him. And now on November 5th, that's when Ridge Holland, who he had been on we'd seen him on NXT UK, we'd seen him on NXT, then he was moved on to SmackDown, and then he went back down to NXT, then he had been bumped down even further down to WWE Evolve, and he had been dealing with a serious injury at that time, and he ended up getting terminated on November the 5th. And also, finally, in 2025, we saw Mick Foley. He had a Legends contract with WWE, and it was about to expire, and Mick Foley made the decision that he didn't want to work with WWE anymore because he was concerned about he really didn't care for how WWE was very pro-President Trump, and it didn't agree with his mindset of things, so Mick Foley decided he didn't want to continue with the company anymore. Mick Foley was like, well, as long as Trump's president, he's really not interested anymore. And that's pretty much the way, that's as far as getting all caught up on all this. That's how all that was going, all this is going. And so it should be interesting to see, over the course of February, if they bring more people up from NXT and if they do, how many people they end up terminating on the main roster and all that. So we'll see how all that plays out, because it seems like they always want to keep the main roster about the same number. If they bring 10 people up from the developmental, then they end up getting rid of 10 people on the main roster. So we'll see how all that plays out. All right, well, I will catch you later on the next video. Take care.